of people who have requested the recordings after the fact. So this is a very amazing program. People want to participate in, even if they can't join live. So it gives me great pleasure once again. My goodness, getting jet lag, aren't we? Iceland, Uganda, Jamaica, Curasau, it's unbelievable. Okay, welcome, good evening to the sixth night of Hanukkah. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Silva. It's wonderful that you've been able to join us, and with Siyata Dishma, you'll be able to stay with us throughout the duration of the talk. People, we have to daven hard that the angel of death stays away from Curasau, because Rabbi Silva might, he's been answering his phone a lot during the day. They've had an emergency with a life and death situation on the island. So we're even more blessed to have him with us at the moment, and that should stay the same. And we should just enjoy the next 45 minutes to an hour. I have to say that tonight's event, I'm going to change my voice to change it into a deep voice now. Our evening tonight is being sponsored by Francine Rose to mark the yahrzeit of her dear father, Izzy Myers, Yisrael Zev Ben Reuven Shalom. May he have an aliyah neshama from all the Torah and all the inspiration that we'll get this evening. The family have Chaim Arukim and Simchas in the year ahead, and going forward in the future, only Simchas and Nachas from each other and from your whole family. Amen. Well, we've learned so much about the incredible work that Rabbonim are doing in some of the most far-flung places all over. Tonight, I couldn't even pronounce the island that you were on. If not for the fact that my wife comes from Florida and knows the ABC Islands, I would be just making a bigger fool of myself than I probably do generally. But so it's incredible that we found you and you live on an island. Now, you should know, dear Holy Law members, that they are advertising for a rabbi on the island. Now, I need you to please put in the text a little bit later if you think I could get away with being a liberal Sephardi rabbi. And if you think that a ginger-haired Western European Jew could get away with being a liberal Sephardi, then living on an island could be my next destination. Apparently there's good remuneration and the place looks stunning. But
Position's been filled.
You might take it seriously. Now, as usual, if you have questions, please write them in the chat to me, and throughout the evening, I will forward those questions on to our guest rabbi this evening, interrupting where I can to pose your fantastic questions. So there is a wealth of information on the internet about the Jews of Curacao, especially the Sephardi community that dates from many, many years ago. Ashkenazim are quite fresh to the area, and I'm sure Chabad is even fresher in terms of the timeline. So let's start at the very beginning. As we know, it's a very good place to start. A popular song this time of the year. And we're going to ask you, Rabbi, tell us generally, describe, before we get to the Jewish side of things, what is life generally like, day-to-day living on the island? Give us a sense of what are people doing, what are things cost in the shops, just sort of paint a picture of what it is to live on what looks like an idyllic island.
Okay, first of all, thank you so much. Do you hear me? Perfect. Thank you so much, Rabbi Rickman, for the introduction, and to the president and board of the community for inviting me to share a little about our beautiful island of Curacao, the historic Jewish life in Curacao, and current and the future of Jewish life in Curacao. It's a great honor and pleasure to be with you. Who would have ever thought a year ago, before the pandemic, that when Hanukkah could come, we would be celebrating Hanukkah across the ocean? This is one of the silver linings, even during these dark days of the pandemic, that Zoom technology, now we're celebrating Hanukkah together, sharing the Hanukkah joy and light across the ocean. So a little about Curacao. We'll get later a little to Curacao. It's a very rich and very interesting Jewish history. Curacao, the etymology for the name Curacao is actually from anyone? It's from Corazon. It's from Spanish or Portuguese, which means heart. Curacao is a central island, and it's located 40 miles off the coast of Venezuela. We're of the southern Antilles, of the more south islands. We're off the coast of Venezuela. And historically, they felt it was central to be considered the heart between Europe, South America, and North America. Life on an island is very different. I grew up personally I was born in Belgium, Antwerp, Belgium. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and my wife is French. So none of us grew up on an island. Life on an island is very different than life. First of all, the economy in Curacao, it was never a tourist-based economy. The economy here was a very Venezuelan-based economy, being that we're a small central country near the coast of Venezuela. So the economy here was always refining oil, Venezuelan oil, at least in recent years, and selling retail to Venezuela. Venezuelans would come here, and the minimum, every Venezuelan that would come here would fly back with a minimum of 10 to 15 suitcases. And it's not because items were being produced here in Curacao, but rather Curacao served as a gateway to Venezuela and other South American countries, where a lot of products were flowing into Curacao. Nothing is produced there, as a matter of fact. Everything would flow in here and then flow out to Venezuela. And in those days, the economy here was a booming economy. The cost of products here, you ask about the cost of products here, it's a lot higher than in many other places. Electricity, cost of living, electricity is very high on all the Caribbean islands. I would say probably 4 to 5 times what you pay in England, definitely in the United States. Therefore, even though we have, I'm trying to convert it to Celsius, we have probably 30 to 32 is our average. The coldest it ever gets here is around 27 Celsius, winter, summer, day, night. It never gets colder than 27 or 26. People here are used to living during the day without electricity, without air conditioning, being that it's prohibitively expensive to run air conditioning. It's just something you get used to. Nothing grows here on the island. Curacao, unlike many of the northern islands, is a desert island. So it's very dry here. It's very arid. We're not in the hurricane zone, Baruch Hashem. So hurricanes all pass a lot north. So nothing grows here. So everything is imported. So food products are more expensive here. The economy today is a little more diversified. There is a lot of banking here. There's a lot of companies, offshore companies, were headquartered here in the past. The local Jewish community, their business today mostly is still retail stores. We'll get a little more to the history later, where the Jews came here from and what they did throughout the years. But today, the economy here is diversified. It's more and more becoming a more tourist-based economy, as our dependency on, we were too dependent on Venezuela. And with the complete collapse of the economy in Venezuela, Curacao took a hit. So now it's becoming more of a tourist-based economy, welcoming more tourists. Life here is, in many ways, it's similar. There's differences, there's similarities. There's its perks, there's the perks, and then there's the, this week on Hanukkah, the Festival of Lights. The whole island was without light. Something went wrong in the electric company, and in an island like Curacao, when something goes wrong with, in the grid, with the main electric company that supplies electricity to the whole island, there were no experts on the island that could fix it. So some areas lost electricity for 50 hours. Baruch Hashem, by us, it was just 22 hours. So we were simultaneously davening and praying for everyone that needed machinery, equipment, medical equipment to stay alive. And then for the thousands of dollars of meat and kosher meat and chicken in the freezers that hopefully, and Baruch Hashem, the miracle of Hanukkah, it all lasted. So that's pretty much what general life is like here on the island.
So let me interrupt you at this point. But our first question for the evening, it might give you a flavor as to what our community is like. And the question is it possible to get the kosher version of the well-known blue Curacao liqueur?
Surprise. So actually, that's a great question. And
the first question tonight.
That the original kosher Curacao blue liqueur is kosher. So check it out. The original, first of all, it was a Jewish company. It's the original liqueur is from a company produced by a company called Senor Liqueurs. And Senor is a Jewish last name. We'll talk a little more about that later. The Abarbanel, who was one of the advisors of King Ferdinand of Spain, when he was expelled during the Inquisition, he left along with 2 of his Talmidim, and one of them was Rabbi David Senor, whose descendants eventually made it to Curacao. And in the 1800s, they established the Curacao liqueur factory, and it's certified kosher by the Star K, which is a very good hechsher from Baltimore. And they're very proud of it. They have a museum here where they welcome tourists, showing them how they produce the liqueur. And there's one exhibit dedicated to showing everyone how it's kosher and how it's under rabbinical supervision. So it is kosher. The original one is 100% kosher.
Fantastic. Jewish life. Let's paint the picture immediately for us. How many Jewish people that you know of are on the island?
The current Jewish life? Okay, so current Jewish life, there's around, we'll talk about the history when we get to that. There were in the past thousands, at a certain point actually, in the 1800s, more than 85%, more than 58% of the local population, more than 58% was Jewish. So you're talking about an island in the Caribbean where more than half of the local population was Jewish. Today, there's a lot less. In general, the population of the island is shrinking because a lot of the youth go to travel to study abroad in the United States or in Holland. Very few of them return. And the Jewish community here has been no exception to that phenomenon. There's currently, I would say, around 200 to 220 Jews on the island. Being that it's such a small place, Curacao is 444 square kilometers. From point to point, it's a long island. It takes an hour and 10 minutes max, and you're off the island. The only way to get off is with a plane. Because the water's here, a lot of people think that there's ferries between the islands. We're just a 10-minute flight to Aruba, but there's no ferries because it's very rough waters with waves 30, 40 feet high. So there's around 220 Jews living here on the island, but because it's such a small island, as a Chabad rabbi here, we've interacted with 98 to 99% of all those Jews. We just had Hanukkah. We had, right after the electricity turned back on, after 22 hours, we had a pre-planned Hanukkah drive-in event where we had the tallest menorah in the Caribbean, 22 feet tall, and everyone gathered in the cars. We were expecting 20 cars, and 54 cars showed up. And that's around 60 to 70% of the island's Jews showed up during COVID for a safe Hanukkah lighting. So being in such a small place, we interact with all of them. As a matter of fact, when a new Jewish family moves to the island, and we're always finding new Jewish families, normally I don't have to go looking for them. The non-Jewish real estate agents will call me up. Many of them know me. It's a small island. And they'll call me and they say, Rabbi, a new member of the tribe. And they know that I welcome them with a mezuzah, a gift, a mezuzah. And that's how we get to meet new Jews here on the island. There's two shuls here. Sorry?
What about anti-Semitism?
There's no anti-Semitism. Look, I can't say there's no anti-Semitism, but anti-Semitism on the island is very rare. On the contrary, connected to the Jewish history on the island, because of it, first of all, between 60 to 70% of the people living here today have Jewish ancestry. I'm talking about non-Jewish people, have Jewish ancestry. For example, these are not traditional Ashkenazi Jewish last names, but in Curacao, the Jewish last names here are Maduro, the head of state, the current president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, happens to have Jewish ancestry from Curacao. Maduro is the Jewish last name. So if you look in the phone book here, there's thousands of Maduros, and their ancestors were all Jewish. They're not Jewish. So they have a great respect for Judaism as a very religious society. They also have a great love for Israel, for the Jewish people, for the Torah. I'm stopped by people all the time. First of all, not many people here look or dress like me. So when I walk in the street, I get people stop me and they say, hey, I saw you 3 weeks ago. They're all keeping tabs on me. They know, because they don't see many people like me. So if they see me in one grocery, they'll remember about it a month later. They have a great respect. As a matter of fact, there's a church over here that they invited me to give their Yom Kippur sermon. I didn't go, obviously, but it's a sozu. They said, on Yom Kippur, they wanted to honor Jewish community. So they called up the Orthodox rabbi. They asked me to deliver a sermon on Yom Kippur. I said I had some previous commitments at our synagogue for Yom Kippur.
That's fantastic. Right, what made you select Curacao as your Chabad Shlichus?
Okay, so from when we grew up, we knew that we wanted to be Chabad Shluchim. We knew we wanted to dedicate our life to the furtherance of Judaism, to move to a place where we can make a difference in helping establish Jewish infrastructure. My wife is French. Her parents run a big Jewish school network in France with over 2,500 Jewish kids. So we were unsure if to move to France. We had some other options, and someone mentioned Curacao. We had the same challenge you had. We didn't even know how to pronounce it, let alone where it was on the map. Most people don't know where Curacao is. Most people, if you tell them Curacao is near Aruba, they're like, oh, Aruba, of course. Aruba is the famous tourist island. Curacao is right near it, although Curacao is 3 times as big as Aruba and has twice the population. We were asked to look into moving here. There's very deep Jewish history here. Jews actually moved here before they even moved to America. Curacao has a continuous Jewish presence in 1651. So we looked into it. We came here in recent years. Many of the Jews left here because there was no Jewish infrastructure. And after visiting here, my wife and I made the decision that we wanted to dedicate our lives to founding a Chabad house here in Curacao. And a month later, we were here on a one-way ticket. It was 1 month, and we wanted to move here before Rosh Hashanah. And it's been an incredible journey since then.
Wow. Let's get the kosher food question out the way, because we've had the alcohol, we've done the l'chaim. Now let's do some brachas on food. Kosher meat, I guess you import it or you shack lots of chickens?
No, so there's not. Curacao is a very dry island. So unlike some of the other islands that have cows or chickens, there's nothing really. We have iguanas and lizards. That's what we have running around. And one of my most common questions that I get, because iguana, you know what an iguana is? People from Florida may know what it is. It looks like a little dinosaur. It's a big lizard. It's actually a local delicacy. The local people eat it here. One of the most common questions I get from tourists is from those that don't have a lot of prior experience with kosher, is if iguana is kosher. So that's the only animal that we have living here on the island. We import. So the question, is it hard or easy to get kosher here? It's relative. I mean, to places with a lot of Jewish infrastructure, it's a lot harder, but I'm sure there's places where it's a lot harder. Dry food, a lot of the dry food here is from Holland. So we use the Dutch kosher list to find kosher products. And kosher meat and chicken, we import, my family imports, and we import also for the local Jewish community, for those that want, from Miami. And it comes by ship. And we order once a year, and we have actually the local ice cream store. There's an American franchise, Baskin Robbins. So they store all our kosher meat or chicken. It's owned by a Jew here on the island. So there's one section with a big sign that says kosher meat and chicken. And in the ice cream store, that's where all our kosher meats and chicken are stored.
You guys are phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. What are the biggest challenges you have faced so far setting up life on the islands?
It's a good question. What are the biggest challenges? To be honest, we don't think a lot about the challenges. Someone asked me recently, we have so we had our first Jewish tourists that came back since before COVID, because our Chabad house work is a lot with the local Ashkenazi Jewish community, and with the unaffiliated Jews, people, with the members of the Sephardi community as well. But also, I would say 50% of our time we dedicate to the tourists. And since March, we haven't had any tourists. And then finally, the first flight came back from New York, and there was a Jewish firm family from New York coming, and they said, "What can we bring you?" And it says after like 9 months that we didn't have any tourists, anything coming in from New York. And we struggled to think of something that we can be brought, because we got used to, my kids don't eat the Jewish nash. They don't eat it. We don't have it here. So, why ask someone to bring it? Then it'll be enough for 1 week. And then in 2 weeks, they'll cry because there won't be any more. So they snack on fruits and vegetables that they have here. So we try not to dwell on the challenges. I can't even think of a challenge. I don't know. This is something if we focus on the challenges, then the challenges will start cropping up suddenly. I'm not going to say, I grew up in Borough Park, which is a very frum Jewish community. Living in Curacao is very different than that. But we do it with such great love that I can't even think of a challenge. I mean, it's very different. I would say it's different.
Beautiful. I like that. So I looked at the website before we spoke tonight, and I noticed you've got two very young kids, which look very cute in the picture.
We even have a newer one. We have a third child. We have
you got to update the website.
You have to update the website. We haven't had time. Sorry.
So what's the word for someone? Okay, so I figured it. One was born in New York. So the other one is a Curasauian. What do you call people from Curacao?
It's actually called Curasau, which means a youth from Curacao. That's in the local language, Papiamentu, which is a hybrid of Spanish, Portuguese, English, Dutch, and a little Hebrew. Believe it or not, a little Hebrew.
It just sounds like a non-Jewish version of Yeshivish, where you've got Hebrew, Yiddish, Aramaic.
That's it. It's like Yeshivish, Yinglish.
Yinglish.
So that's the local language here, and it's called a child born in Curacao is called a Curasau. A child from. So I have two sons born here, and my daughter was born before we moved here. We moved here when she was 3 months old.
So are you fluent in this language yet?
To be honest, no. It's I've learned Spanish since moving here. People here are very multilingual, kind of like the people in. I'm originally from Antwerp. The people in Antwerp are also. Everyone speaks like Flemish, French, Hebrew, Yiddish, English. So here, likewise, most of the people here, they speak Dutch, because Dutch is the local language. We're a Dutch island. We're part of the Dutch kingdom. They speak Dutch, they speak Spanish, they speak Papiamentu, and they speak English. That's by default 4 languages. So I've learned Spanish, not Papiamentu yet.
Incredible. Schooling. What would you do for your kids when they get to school age?
They're at school age. My daughter's 3. She knows all the alphabets. She knows how to read Hebrew. We homeschool. We have a small school. There's 2 students. Each one of them is the best in the class, and the oldest in the class and the youngest in the class, and the only child in the class. We have my daughter and my son. We homeschool them at home. It's, you know, we have to start young. My son is 1.5, and he has a few hours of homeschool every day. There's no other Jewish school here. In the past, there was a Hebrew school here years before we came, when the community was at its peak. There was 120 kids. Today, there's very few children. There's a new generation of babies. So we homeschool, and eventually they'll join Hebrew school, online school. But we do homeschool, and we have a special exemption from the government to homeschool. We have a small school. It's called Gan Chabad Curasau.
Are you the menahel, or is your wife the menaheles?
I defer to her. She's the menaheles. I'm the substitute teacher when the regular teacher can't come in.
Now, after this week of Hanukkah meeting the rabbis, I'm very keen to write a book on the hidden tzaddikim of the world. And who are they? They are the women of the Chabad rabbis who support the work you do in the most.
I don't know if they're so hidden. I don't think it's so hidden. I think everyone can see that. It's incredible. They keep everything running. There's no, you know, I mean, my wife just had a baby recently, and, you know, I offered, you know, to bring help, and we had extra help here. But I mean, you know, on my part, I said, you know, we'll do something on Zoom for the community. And my wife insisted on making this historical menorah lighting here, where you're talking about on a tiny island, 54 cars to drive in. It was, you know, and we were working with 3 days of no electricity before, and this is just a month after 3 weeks after giving birth. So you're 100% right about that. I don't know, you know, I don't think it's so hidden, but they're definitely the tzaddikim.
So we've heard so far of going to the mikveh with crabs, going to in the sea, climbing over some ice glaciers in Iceland in the winter. It sounded absolutely life and death craziness. I saw there's no mikveh on the island. I'm sure that's one of your plans, to build a mikveh, no doubt.
Actually, yes, there was one here. Historically, there was one. There was one many, many years ago, when the Jewish community in the 1700s. If you want, I can give you afterwards a brief synopsis of the history. Very fascinating history, Jewish history in Curacao. So believe it or not, I live in a house on the street number 2. Number 3 had a mikveh. Number three, one house near mine, my next door neighbor. Today, there's an Indian non-Jewish couple living there. And 15 years ago, there was someone here that became a Baal Tshuva, and he built a private mikveh in his home. This is before I came here. Him and his wife became frum. Today, they live in Lakewood, New Jersey, and they have 8 children. And they built a mikveh in their home, and I'm in the process of hopefully trying to move one house over. You know, it's incredible, the hashgacha pratis, you know, the divine providence, that I picked a random home that we purchased when we came here because I got a good deal in it. It's the only reason I bought that home. And one house over has a kosher mikveh that's waiting for us to purchase it. So with Hashem's help. But until then, we have the clearest mikveh, one of the clearest mikvehs, the cleanest mikvehs in the world, which is the ocean, the Caribbean Sea.
If you give me the phone number of the Indian people, I'll call them up and tell them to leave. We can start a phone campaign for you. Please move to number 2. The rabbi needs number 3. I'm sure it will.
We can switch. Yeah, we can just change homes. I see a question on the public chat. Should I answer that? There was a question that came in.
All right. With young Jews leaving, what is the future of the community? How do you see the future of an aging community with all the young guys moving away? Okay, so first of all, there are a lot of young guys moving away, but there are also a lot of young families moving to the island, especially as the economy on the island is changing, especially post-COVID, where a lot of people are working, not post-COVID, but what's going to be post-COVID. People are going to be working virtually. There's a lot of people moving here. There's, like I say, every month we meet a new young Jewish family here, and we do have children's programs. We don't have a school. We do have children's programs, and we have 12, 13 Jewish babies there. And for me, that is a Jewish community. You know, when we make events over here on the island, we never compare ourselves to any other Jewish community, because we're never going to have, you know, my father-in-law has in his school is 2,500 kids. Realistically, I'm never going to have 50 kids in the Jewish school, but I have to provide a Jewish education to the 1, to the 2, to the 3, to the 4, to the, you know, when we make an event, I don't make it for 100 people. I make an event for 1 person. And if 100 people show up, that's even better. And I hope to grow it. But I never set expectations before an event. And Baruch Hashem, last Hanukkah, we had over 300 people here, which was every single Jew on the island plus tourists. So, and every shot, you know, believe it or not, on an island with 200 something Jews, last Shabbos, we had 40 people in shul for Shabbos, 40 people on a regular Shabbos. Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, we have 90. You know, so it's a small place, but we seek to reach out to everyone.
I see another question. Is there an Eruv on the
Is there an
island?
yeah, is there an Eruv?
No, there is no Eruv yet. There is it's a karma. It's not 100% a public domain because it is 100% an island and there are no 600,000 people living here on the island, but there is no Eruv on the island.
So I'm going to stop asking for the moment, and we would love to hear the history,
Sure.
the history that you alluded to. So take it away.
Okay, thank you so much. Curacao has a Curacao was discovered by the New World in 1499. It was discovered by the Spanish. And then for the next few hundred years, the island, the French, the Spanish, and the Dutch kept fighting over the island. Mistakenly, they believed that there was a lot of gold and other natural resources here. There's a lot of gems and diamonds, but they're not below the ground. Human diamonds, human gems, but there was no gold here in Curacao. So they fought over the island, and in 1634, the island was conquered by the Dutch. And when the Dutch conquered the island, on the very first ship that sailed into the port, there was a Jew on board. His name was Shmuel Cohen, and he was a translator. So that was the first Jew in recorded history that set foot in Curacao. The Jews that came here, the original settlers that came here, they were Spanish Portuguese Jews that were real Sephardic Jews. You know, today when you say Sephardic Jews, usually you mean Mizrahi Jews, Middle Eastern Jews, North African Jews. The Jews here are real Sephardic Jews, meaning that they came from Spain. Their families were from Spain. 1492, many of them fled to Portugal. And when the Inquisition was enacted in Portugal, they fled to the only liberal country in Europe where they had the freedom to practice Yiddishkeit, which was Holland. And after the Dutch conquered the island in 1634, they encouraged the Jews to move from Holland, the Spanish Portuguese Jews, to move from Holland to Curacao. And in 1651, 12 families settled here. They came with a Sefer Torah and they established a satellite community. So it wasn't an independent community. It was quite interesting. It was as if a branch of the original community in Amsterdam. I'm sure many of you have heard of the synagogue in Amsterdam, the famous Spanish Portuguese, the Snoga, which is, I believe it's from the 1670s in Amsterdam. So when they came here, the Sephardic Jews came here to Curacao, they built a copy, a replica of the synagogue in Amsterdam, and they consecrated it in 1732. And that synagogue is still built. It's still in use by the Sephardic community today, which today is a liberal community. As you, by the way, the vacancy, the job that you has since been taken in the past few months. It's still available online. But so they have an active, somewhat active community. What's interesting here is that the floor of the synagogue is covered in sand. Many of the Sephardic synagogues in the shuls in the Caribbean have a floor made of sand. There's a lot of different reasons for it. Some of the historians believe that it's to remember the Mesirat Nefesh, the sacrifices that their ancestors made in Spain when gathering in secret to daven. At great risk to their lives, they put sand on the floor to muffle the sound of their footsteps. Or it's to remember the travels of the Jews in the Midbar, in the desert. And that shul is still here till today in Curacao. They also have a Jewish museum here, with a lot of artifacts. What's interesting here, being that the community has been active since 1651, a lot of the artifacts from 1651 are still in use because there was no pogroms here, there was no Holocaust here. So everything is still in use in the synagogue. And one of the most interesting exhibits in the museum here is a plaque on the wall, very unique, where they have large keys like a 6 inches or 8 inches big. And these are the keys of the Jews' homes in Spain and Portugal. When they left Spain and Portugal in 1492, they took the keys to their homes with them, originally believing that one day they would be welcomed back. And when that didn't materialize, they hung them up in their homes in a picture frame. And there's photos of it available online. They hung it up in their home it was a symbol of pride, showing, look what we gave up for our Yiddishkeit, look what we were ready to sacrifice, look what Mesiras Nefesh we were ready to go to. So that's the Sephardic Jews. They were very successful here. They contributed a lot to the development of the island. Many of the street names here are Jewish street names, not Friedman, Goldberg, Cohen, but Henriquez, Gomez Cáceres, Da Costa Gomez. These are Sephardic Jewish names. Many of the buildings in the historic downtown have Jewish dates on them. And Magen David, Star of David, from the early 1700s, they have Jewish dates, like 5466. And on the other side, it says, whatever it was, 1706. There's different dates of Jewish on the Jewish buildings. There's a Jewish cemetery here from 1659. As you said before, later a second wave of Jews came here, Ashkenazi Jews. They came here, actually, the first Ashkenazi Jews came here in the 1920s, and they came here by mistake. They were on a boat heading to America, to the Golden Medina, and then the boat docked in Curacao on the way, because it would stop in Venezuela and then go up to New York, and the captain welcomed them to America. The problem was it was Central America, not North America, and very happily, they took their suitcases and they got off the boat, and many of them never went back on the boat. They were welcomed by the Jews from the Sephardic community, although they didn't merge. They did not join the same shul. There was a big difference in social class. The Sephardim were very wealthy. The banks here on the island, this is one place where the Jews really do own the banks. And they have since the 1600s. They were not welcome because the Jews were coming from Romanian, Polish shtetls. They were penniless. The Sephardic shul wouldn't allow you in if you didn't have a suit. And the Jews from Romania didn't have suits when they came off the boat. So they founded what's today known as the Sharei Tzedek Ashkenazi Jewish community. They were very traditional, and Curacao became known as the shtetl of the Caribbean. They all spoke Yiddish till today. Many of the people at our community, second generation, third generation, born here on the island, speak Yiddish. It was a very Hamish feeling here. It was like a shtetl. Interestingly enough, Curacao played a big role in saving Jews during World War II as well. First role was Curacao, as we said before, had an oil refinery, which was established in 1912 by the Dutch Shell company, the oil company. And 70% of the oil that the Allies used in World War II was refined here in South America, in Central America, in Curacao, and shipped to the front in Europe. Nazi U-boats came all the way to Curacao, to the port, all the way near Venezuela, to try to torpedo the ships carrying. There was a blackout here during the years of the war. You know, you're talking about South America. They weren't allowed to they weren't allowed to turn on lights at night so that the Nazi U-boat shouldn't spot the island. That's number one, the first connection. The second connection is, I'm sure many of you know that a lot of Jews survived the war by running. They originally fled to Kobe, Japan, and then Shanghai, China, including the Mir Yeshiva and the Chabad Yeshiva. Thousands of Jews survived by fleeing to Shanghai. And the only way they were able to get to Shanghai was because of Curacao. Because in 1940, a lot of Jewish refugees, Polish, were in Lithuania, and they were trying to get to Kobe, Japan. In order to get to Japan, they had to travel through Russia on the Trans-Siberian line. In order to get into Russia, they had to show another destination that wasn't Japan. And Jan Swartendijk, who was the Dutch consul in Lithuania, along with Sugihara, who was the Japanese consul in Lithuania, they collaborated together and they ended up stamping close to 20,000 Jewish passports that the final destination was Curacao, although they never ended up coming here. That's the way they were able to get into Russia and eventually to make their way to Kobe, Japan and Shanghai. And it later became known as the Curacao visa, which saved thousands of Jews during World War II. After World War II, the Ashkenazi community grew. All the survivors of the relatives here came to join their families. But since then, you know, unfortunately, the community shrunk. A lot of people left. There were many years that there was no rabbi here. So when we came here, I joined along with the Ashkenazi Orthodox Jewish community here, which is a very traditional community, although many of the people here may not lead Orthodox lifestyles 100% of the time, but it's very important for them that the shul function as they were very traditional Jews. And it's important to them that the shul continue to function as an Orthodox shul. And so I serve as the rabbi of the Shari Tzedek Ashkenazi Jewish Center. Although as Chabad rabbi, our events, our programs are open to all the Jews of the island, whether the Ashkenazi Jews, the Sephardic Jews, the unaffiliated Jews. And before we came here, there was no rabbi for 10 to 12 years. And then we moved down here and we've seen a resurgence in Jewish life. A lot more people coming around to shul, to events, programs. That's besides for tourism. I'm talking about local Jews.
Okay, I'm going to give you a challenge. Okay, I haven't done this before this week, so I'm giving you a challenge. I want you to think of your elevator pitch to convince us to move to Curacao. What would you say if we were in an elevator and you wanted to get young blood or even experienced blood, because we have some experienced blood here, not just young blood.
I'm sure
what would you tell us?
I feel bad. I wouldn't want to grow my community shrinking any other community.
I mean, chas v'shalom, how could we leave Manchester with the doom,
That's what
the
I'm saying.
gloom,
It's going to be a
and the
little high.
grey, and the cold to come to the 27 degrees?
I think you have such a wonderful community that the best elevator pitch won't work, but I can give you a sample elevator pitch that I would give
Go
other
for
people. Curacao is a great place. Curacao is a undiscovered gem. There's a lot of potential here. When I met the Prime Minister here for the first time, he told me afterwards that I should be their Minister of Tourism because I'm more enthusiastic about the future of the island than them. I think that's pretty sad, but I mean, on my part, Curacao is a great place. You can have a great life here, and Yiddishkeit we have a very active, growing, and flourishing Jewish community here. There's a lot of opportunities here, a lot of financial opportunities here. You need people that think out of the box. People here, unfortunately, people are very old school over here. So a lot of people, the new ideas that caught on in other parts of the world haven't caught on here, and people are very reluctant to try them. I'm talking about different business ideas, and there's a lot of opportunity here. It's a beautiful place, a very safe
This
place.
must be a tall building. This elevator's going quite a long way up to ceiling. You've got to stop. Right. Now,
let's see if we're successful. Let's see if
do you know, is there a direct flight from Iceland to Curacao? Because we're going to Iceland first, to Reykjavik, then from there we're coming to visit you. Is there a direct flight?
So unfortunately, one of the sad things is that we don't have not everyone thinks like me. So there's not a lot of direct flights from many parts in the world. That's one of our struggles here, our challenges as an island, especially post-COVID. But I mean, even pre-COVID, we're the island with one of the least flights. And it's a shame because there's so much here. It's such a unique place. I mean, I'm sure many of you have seen the beautiful architecture in Amsterdam, the Dutch architecture. Now imagine that from the 16 and 1700s here in the middle of the Caribbean. You don't have that any other place. You have authentic Dutch architecture here. There's authentic culture. It's not a tourist trap here. The people that come here like it because they see the authentic, life, Caribbean life over here in Curacao. People are very, it's not a party island here. People that come here are looking for a more relaxed vacation. The prices here are incredible compared to the other islands.
So Tachlis, how do we get to you?
The only way to get to us from Europe is through Amsterdam. There's
okay,
so
Iceland, listen to me, people. Iceland on EasyJet to Holland. And then we're gonna salute the King of Holland and then go to his island in Curacao, and it'll be great.
I have another option for you. Just yesterday, they restarted flight from Gatwick. I don't know how far Gatwick is from Manchester.
Well, it's nearer than Holland.
Okay, good. So you can get from Gatwick to Aruba and from Aruba to Curacao on a small plane, which is 10 minutes.
Okay, what Shabbos time's like? Because in Iceland, it goes out at 1:30 in the morning in the summer.
So we don't have any, by the way, I would also recommend to take a break between the Iceland weather and Curacao. You don't want to get a shock over here between the extreme weathers. Shabbos times here, since we're near the equator, first of all, we don't change the time. So there's no daylight savings time here. We're always the same time. Shabbos varies. It's around 6:30. The earliest Shabbos comes in is around 5:45. The latest it comes in is 6:45, and an hour later Shabbos ends. So it doesn't vary a lot here. It's pretty much the same throughout.
This is getting more tempting as we go along, people. Now, please, can I just ask everyone here, because we do have our esteemed secretary is on the call tonight. Her husband has made a plea that we don't drive her too crazy to arrange all the flights too quickly to Iceland, because she will not cope. But I think she's happy generally just not to arrange them all at one time. Okay, what about Pesach? Pesach, Matzah, how do you manage a Yom Tov? Sukkot, Abba Minim, Miami, Venezuela, where's it all come from?
Oh, so first of all, Venezuela, unfortunately, is a disaster. I mean, Venezuela is
that you as the tourism minister of Curacao making fun of Venezuela? You should be careful. Your official capacity.
I would do anything but make fun of Venezuela. I say Tehillim for Venezuela. Venezuela's Jewish community, just as a microcosm of what's really going on there. Venezuela's Jewish community had a very big frum community and a very proud frum community, a flourishing. They had a kollel, they had a yeshiva there, Jewish school, frum Jewish schools. They went from 35,000 members to under 3,000 within the past 10 years. It shrunk drastically because of what's going on there in the government. People are leaving all the time. Many of them moved to Miami. Many of them moved to Panama. It's a shame that there wasn't a Chabad house here then, because we could have attracted many of them to come here, because we're just on a very clear day, you can see Venezuela from here. So it would have been a good place for them to live and to transit back for their businesses. So Venezuela, unfortunately, Venezuela more than 15% of the non-Jewish population has left. More than 20% of 15% of the residents in Curacao are Venezuelan refugees that fled and risked their lives to come here because there's no food, there's no medicine there. They go weeks without electricity. The Chabad rabbi there, he came here, he was the male for my first son. My son that was born here, I brought him in, it was a 15-minute flight from Venezuela, but the electricity went out in the airport there. So there was a 9-hour delay for a 15-minute flight, and they didn't let him leave the airport, and there was no air conditioning, and it's just as hot as here. And when he landed, I said, it was around Hanukkah time. So I asked, what would you like to take back for your family? So he took back toilet paper because there was no toilet paper in Venezuela, diapers for his baby, and a bottle of Coke because the Coke in Venezuela wasn't kosher, 1 bottle of Coke as his children for a Hanukkah present. And they were living 5 days without running water and without electricity because of the chaos, what's going on there. So I don't get anything from Venezuela. I just sent to Venezuela. Unfortunately, there's nothing I can get there. When it comes to Pesach, something very interesting here is that the Jews of this community, specifically of the Ashkenazi community, Pesach was always something very special to them. They were very traditional, and they all, even the ones that don't keep kosher throughout the year, at Pesach, almost everyone here keeps 100% kosher at Pesach, and they spend weeks before they change, they clean out the house, they change the cutlery and the pots and the pans to kosher for Pesach, and every year we make a big order for the community. 50 to 60 families order completely kosher Pesach food. We bring in hundreds of pounds of matzah, canned gefilte fish, which I would never eat before I lived here, and many other things that we would bring in from the States. So that's how we get kosher for Pesach food from Miami. And likewise, Arba Minim. This year it was a little more challenging, but every year we normally have a chazan that comes in for Rosh Hashanah, and he would bring the Arba Minim with him when he comes already.
What's been your craziest Chabad house experience? Maybe the one that has the most hashgacha pratis to it, or something that just, every Chabad shaliach needs a good story. So what's your good Chabad shaliach story?
So there's 2 stories. There's 2 off the top of my mind. Number 1, I grew up in Borough Park. When we came,
it's not your fault.
It's not my fault. I was actually born in Belgium. Nothing's my fault. But anyways, sorry, I was born in Antwerp. I grew up in Borough Park. And when we came here, our first child was born in NYU. This isn't 100% connected to my work here, but it's an amazing story nonetheless. And when we moved here, my wife was pregnant. My wife became pregnant shortly after, and we were going to give, roughly a year after we moved here, my wife needed to give birth. And so now there's a new hospital, but then there wasn't a new hospital, and the hospital was from 1861. And it hasn't been renovated or refurbished since then. So I think that some of the original viruses were still alive. We're very historic, like everything else in Curacao, still living on the walls. It was unfortunately a disaster of a hospital. They were in the middle of building a new one, and they ran out of money. So we were unsure if to have our child here or to go to New York. Safety-wise, it would have been better to go to New York because chas v'shalom, if there's an emergency, it's hard to get off the island. But on the other hand, going to New York would mean my wife would need to travel a month before and then stay a month after. And I don't travel, I don't leave the island a lot because every Shabbos, we have a minyan. I have a lot of responsibilities here on the island to the community. So I barely ever leave the island. Now I haven't been off almost in a year. So we weren't sure what to do. Go to New York, not go to New York. One day I'm walking in the street and a large, a heavy-set Jamaican woman starts screaming across the center, historic downtown, "Rabbi, Rabbi, Rabbi." I turned around and she's screaming, "Rabbi." She said, "Oh, it's been so long that I haven't seen a rabbi." And I said, "Why? When was the last time that you would see in Jamaica? Would you see many rabbis walking around?" She said, "No." She said, "I live half in Curacao and I just moved here from Borough Park, Brooklyn, New York." I said, "What? You just moved here from Borough Park?" "I just moved here from Borough Park, Brooklyn." She said, "Yes." She said, "I know all the big rabbis in Brooklyn." I said, "How do you know all the big rabbis from Brooklyn?" She said, "Are you kidding?" She takes out of her bag, she had a big diploma, and I read the diploma, and it said registered doula and baby nurse, and from some frum organization in Brooklyn. And she starts explaining to me how she knows better than the best rabbis how to heal a baby after the breach. I said, "Breach? What's that?" And finally I got it, the Brit Milah. She was trained by the rabbis with the white beards in Brooklyn. And now she lives here in Curacao. And I said, "This is such hashgacha pratis." And she says, "I know Ruchi, Pesci, Rifki." She starts telling me all the names for the people she worked in Borough Park. I was pinched. I couldn't believe it. And I said, this is crazy, Hashgacha Pratis. And so I asked her for references, and she says, Rabbi, God made us meet, and he wants me to help you. And, I told her that morning I had a conversation with my wife to go to New York to have the baby here. And to make a very long story short, she ended up charging. She was a top-notch nurse in Borough Park. Everyone knows her in Borough Park. And when I called the people from Curasau asking for, references about her, when I called them, they couldn't believe that the Chabad rabbi in Curasau met their beloved baby nurse in the street here. And she ended up being mamish heaven sent, nothing less than that. She moved into our homes. She knew a lot better than all the doctors and the nurses here. And, for us, that was a big Hashgacha Pratis where we saw that we moved out here from Borough Park and Hashem took care of us. That's what I say. You ask me what challenges? There's no challenges. Hashem takes care of us, everything we need. We came here this time also because over here, even now that we have a new hospital, we just had a baby, but we leave the hospital right away. Because let's just say that the care isn't as top-notch as it probably is in Manchester. So like 3 hours after the baby's born, you leave the hospital because it's safer to be at home. And this baby nurse was there, the second baby as well. Hashem sent her to be with us from New York. That's one story. Second story is that a few years ago, I got a call from some tourists and they were looking to go deep sea fishing here in Curacao. Curacao is a very small place. People know me here. I know a lot of people here. I very rarely meet a Jew that's always been living here that I didn't know about. The new ones I get to meet, but the ones that are living here years, it's quite rare. So I looked online. I wanted to help these tourists have a deep sea fishing experience. So I looked online and I found a fisherman with a boat named Sint Elizabeth, I guess after the Dutch Queen Elizabeth, or was it the British Queen, or was there a Dutch Queen Elizabeth? Who knows? I think there's definitely a British Queen Elizabeth. But his boat's name was Queen Elizabeth. Anyway, I call him up and I see he advertises on his website that he speaks Spanish, Papiamentu, English, Dutch, Hebrew. And the Hebrew struck me like, what? How would this local fisherman speak Hebrew? So I called him up and I asked him if he can take these fishermen, these local Jewish tourists, the Jewish tourists fishing. And he said, no, his boat's out of water. To make a long story short, before he hung up, I said, I have to ask you, how do you speak Hebrew? So he says, tells me, I lived in Israel for 5 years. I said, really? And where are you from? Curacao. I said, so I thought there's a lot of non-Jews here, the Dutch, a lot of them volunteer at kibbutzim and they volunteer in Israel. So I thought he was, I still wasn't sure. I was feeling around. So I said, and what's your connection to Israel? He said, my mother was a hidden child during the Holocaust. And she ended up, after the war, she was traumatized. She moved to Curacao. She married someone non-Jewish. And he was born. He was in his lower 70s, and I asked him to meet him. I met with him. He ended up living in Israel for 5 years. He'd never been in a shul in his life. He knew one thing. He knew he was Jewish. And when Israel participated for the first time in the Olympics, he was a world famous trainer. It's a physical trainer. So he traveled and he helped Israel actually win the first gold medal. I think it was in 1982. He lived in Israel 5 years. He never went to shul. He came here back to Curacao. He invited me the next week. We made up to meet at his boat. The next week, I show up at his boat. He has a big fishing boat here. He does it as a hobby, and like a 40-something foot boat. And it's all painted black and white in honor of the Israeli flag. That week, he had repainted it. He knew he was meeting me. He said, we got to change my boat. Now he's going to start living as a proud Jew. And we put up a mezuzah on his boat. And for the first time in his life, he put on tefillin, and he hasn't missed a Shabbos in shul since then. And this is just from random tourists that asked me to help them go deep sea fishing. And that put me in touch with a Yid that lived here almost his whole life, that never once came to shul. And he cried like a baby when we put on tefillin the first time, and we put the mezuzah up on his room, on his boat. And stories like this happen all the time here.
Well, I think, people ask me as an educator, why are there no miracles today? I think, you see them. You see the results of your efforts, of your desire to spread Torah to people. Kodesh Baruch Hu opens, you do your bit, and Hashem gives you.
Exactly. There's only miracles. There's no nature. When you live in a place like this, there's no nature. Nothing happens. Nothing happens because there's no natural course of things. Everything that happens is a miracle. I don't meet Yidden in shul here. New Yidden, I meet them in grocery stores. I meet them when someone has a flat tire. That's how I meet the new Yidden here. So everything that happens is for a reason, and Hashem brings it about. Exactly like the rabbi said, if you do your best, Hashem, He does the rest, and His rest is a lot better than your best. So
You have been absolutely fantastic. Can we please do a round of applause, a clap? You've been absolutely brilliant. So we
Thank you.
thank you very, very much. Would you like to leave us with a Chanukah or a message that we can take with us?
Sure. First of all, I want to invite everyone. If it was a big success, I would like to invite you all to come here and visit Curacao. There's a lot of Jewish history here. There's a lot of, it's a great place. It's a great place where we have to work on setting up. You said that the secretary's wife was going to help set up with the tickets. I can also be of a help setting up whoever would like to ever come visit here, to come down to Curacao. And I just want to say that what the rabbi was saying before, and what we were saying before, that when you live in a place like this, you see it more, but it's really true, is that, you know, the famous question of the Beit Yosef and Hanukkah, of why we have the 8 nights of Hanukkah. Why is Hanukkah an 8-day holiday? After all, the miracle was just 7 days. That the candle, that the oil lit the first night of Hanukkah, that was natural. They found 1 jug of oil. So the holiday should have started the 2nd day when it should have already burnt out. Now we can start celebrating. Now it's a great miracle. So there's hundreds of answers to this question. It's the Jewish question with the most answers. As a matter of fact, there's Jewish Sepharim, books printed with just answers to this question. Some of them have 100, 150 different answers. Some of the sages, some of the commentators answer that the miracle, the reason that the first day of Hanukkah is the holiday, it's because of the miracle of finding the oil, right? They searched, they couldn't find it, then they found it. That's what the first day of the holiday commemorates, or the military victory. But the other commentators say that the first day, the reason for the first day of the holiday is because that oil burns even 1 day. That itself is a great miracle. You know, we tend to separate things into nature and miracles, right? That the sun goes up in the morning, of course, right? What day doesn't the sun come up in the morning? And then when there's a supernatural thing and the sun stays out extra like it did by Yeshua in Dome, oh, that's supernatural, that's a miracle. But the truth is, nature is God's way of hiding himself, but that itself is a great miracle. And that's the miracle, that's the reason for the first day of Hanukkah. First day of Hanukkah, we celebrate the miracle of nature, the miracle that Hashem does for us. And throughout our day, there's nonstop miracles. And we have to start appreciating the natural miracles as much as we appreciate the supernatural miracles in our lives.
Gewaldig. I want to give you a bracha that you should have continued bracha and hatzlacha with ruchnias and gashmias, that we should be able to see those brachas and experience so many more. For Holy Law members who I can see are very anxious because our normal shul trip involves a lot of grave hopping. There's no doubt plenty of graves of the ancient Jewish people in Curacao. So if you're worried about going on a short trip that doesn't involve going to graveyards, we can still find many ancient graveyards in Curacao. So we can still get the normal trip. But,
interestingly enough, in Curacao, you have Jewish pirates. You have Jewish gravestones.
Oh, shiver me timbers. Oh, I can't wait to join. It's going to be fantastic.
You have some graves over here. You have a grave that on the top, he was a Cohen. So you have the hands on top, and the bottom is skull and bones. He was multi-talented.
Well, okay, you've definitely, as you said that I watched my mother, one of these screens, running off to her bedroom to get her diary. You went somewhere, Mum, maybe to get your calendar. You might have your first person booking. I don't know where you went. You tell me later. But I noticed you ran off somewhere.
Come here. Are there any more questions?
We're going to leave it at this stage. We will no doubt be in touch again because you've been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me. Everyone. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Please go. We'll see each other tomorrow evening on this channel. Join us again. Thank you very much.